Welcome to After the Breach podcast. We're your hosts, Jeff Friedman and Sarah Shimazu. Tonight, we're welcoming Dr. Jeff Ventre to the show. We'll be talking to him about the award-winning documentary Blackfish and its effects almost 10 years later. We'll also share the latest scoop on what's been happening with the whales in the Salish Sea since our last episode. Thanks for joining us for this episode of After the Breach podcast. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Jeff. And Jeff.
And Jeff. Welcome, Jeff.
I look forward to just having a nice time with you guys and talking whale stuff. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to talk with you tonight.
So, Jeff,
I sent Jeff a tweet tonight because I wanted him to see my orca Tilikum motorcycle that I've been driving around the Pacific Northwest, and I actually have Tilikum's eye patch on it, and I love pulling it up alongside rivers and talking about dams in my tweets. And anyway, I thought you guys would appreciate that because it is an actual replica of Tilikum's eye patch, and it gets looks everywhere I go. So I guess one form of passive activism, so to speak.
I love it.
That is awesome. And if it's cool with you, I'd love to post a photo of your Tilikum bike in our show notes. It is it looks really cool.
I would love to do that. And it gets honks and people coming out to talk about it. So it's a nice entry point for the conversation about orcas and also salmon.
That is awesome. And yeah, I'm sure it's a great conversation starter. And I do want to I want to talk a bit about the Blackfish effect and what's happening almost 10 years after the film. I did rewatch it again this week. I think I've seen it a few dozen times, and it's amazing that it never fails to have the same emotional impact. Can you talk a little bit about you were one of the former trainers that came forward and was featured in the film, and had experienced what it was like to be an animal trainer and an orca trainer for captive orcas. Can you talk a little bit about how the origins of Blackfish, how it got started, how you got involved in the film?
Sure. If you want to take it all the way back, and I'm happy to do that because of the intelligent audience I'm sure that you guys draw with this type of podcast from San Juan Island. My involvement with Blackfish actually began with Dr. Astrid van Ginneken and Ken Balcomb's invitation to come out and participate in Orca Survey back in 1995 while I was still a senior trainer at SeaWorld. The acceptance of that invitation, as it turned out, actually contributed to my demise at SeaWorld. But seeing the killer whales, as I said in the movie, swimming in straight lines, had a huge impact on me, radically altered my view of what I was doing. And I later found out that not one staff level trainer at any of the SeaWorld had actually seen a killer whale. And the only reason why Chuck Tompkins, the curator, and Thad Lefinick, the corporate VP, had seen them is because they actually came out with Bill Davis in, I think, 1993 to capture footage for the Legend of Shamu show that we were doing at SeaWorld in Orlando. And Astrid, of course, had been following Gudrun from the Dolphinarium Harderwijk since 1988 and made like 17 to 20 trips to Orlando. She and I became friends. She mentions me in her book, along with ironically, Mark Simmons and Lindsay Rubenkamp, who are still in the industry. But that started a friendship. And then fast forward, I went back to professional school, including medical school. And in 2006, when Ken Peters was pulled down by Kasaka, I received a phone call from ABC, I believe it was ABC News Nightline show. And they wanted me to appear on that show. And I was firmly in the midst of my third year of medical school. And I declined. Come to find out, I think the same mechanism happened in 2006 as 2010. The news agencies were wanting comments from killer whale experts, ex-trainers, people at the Center for Whale Research. And I think that they passed the baton to me both times. When Dawn was killed in February of 2010, a guy named Gabe Ramirez, a producer at CNN, called Ken and Howard, I believe, at the Center for Whale Research and asked for comment. And Howie passed the baton to me, so to speak. And so I was reached by Gabe Ramirez, who put me in contact with the show producer for AC360. And I initially declined that opportunity again, but only for a few hours, because both Chica and my sister and John Jett said, "Hey man, you've been talking about this stuff for, a decade now, and it's time that you said something." So I went on the show. I was living in New Orleans at the time when Dawn was killed, doing a physical medicine residency there. And I got on the show and I talked about Tilikum. I expressed the fact that I hope, because there was talk of actually euthanizing him initially. So I addressed that, and I addressed his temperament, and, said good things about him and other things about captivity itself. And that interview led to another appearance on CNN, this time with Wolf Blitzer a day or two later. And then Thursday of that same week, I was asked to get on the CBS morning show, and that interview is still online, archived on YouTube. In 2000, it was probably February, close to the end of February 2010. CBS Early Show is what it was called, and that got the attention of Tim Zimmerman, the great journalist at Outside Magazine, who I believe he still writes for, but Tim's also written several books, and he and I kind of connected because we both like to sail. And he reached out to me right through the LSU. That's where I was a resident, LSU in New Orleans. He emailed me through the available state website for LSU Health Sciences Center. And I responded a little tentatively at first because I didn't know who I was talking to. And eventually we did an interview, and he talked to me and John Jett, and we were featured as the kind of former trainer voices for the piece that he wrote, Killer in the Pool, which was a cover story for Outside Magazine in June of 2010. And Gabriella Cowperthwaite read that article, and that is what drew her to the story. And then Tim and I formed a group called Orca Aware with the Orca Project, yourself, Howie, a lot of other people, ex-trainers jumped on board. We had Carol, myself, Samantha Berg, you, Howard, Astrid, initially, the Orca Project, Colleen Gorman, a lot of great people on there, and we started communicating. And Tim brought Gabriella into that mix, and we had already decided to do a Superpod 1 in 2011 because there were several different storylines going on. David Kirby wanted to interview trainers for the book Death at SeaWorld. A lot of the work that we had done with each other was at a distance, and Carol, JJ, Samantha, and I were great friends. We just kind of wanted to get together and see wild killer whales together. So we put together Superpod 1 in July of 2011, and Gabriella came with a documentary film crew, and that's how Blackfish began. And she got a lot of the interviews. About 75% of the film, I think, was filmed on San Juan Island at various locations. And then, about 25% of it was filmed either at Laurel Parquet, or I think JJ was filmed at Stetson in DeLand, Florida. So my involvement really began with the invitation from Astrid back in 1995 while I was still a killer whale trainer. And that connection to the Center for Whale Research is what pointed CNN to me the day that Dawn was killed. And then when I got on a couple international news networks like CNN and CBS, that caught the attention of Tim. And then his great article caught the attention of Gabriella. And the trainers had already organized. So Gabby just kind of stepped in, and she did a masterful job with the film. But, the four of us mainly, and Dino as well, five of us already had a great chemistry. And I think that's one of the reasons why the film is so successful is that, a lot of times we literally finish each other's sentences because we've known each other since, the late 80s.
That's
amazing. Pretty much how it started. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing that it goes that the genesis goes that far back. And I do remember, and
Yeah.
I'll post a link in the show notes to Tim Zimmerman's article in Outside Magazine, Killer in the Pool. I remember that was a really powerful article. And I think
Yeah.
all of this was just, the perfect storm, the perfect coming together of this movement that, I mean, anti-captivity had been out there for a while, but wasn't really, I wouldn't say it wasn't gaining traction, but all of these events were starting to gain momentum. And then, Blackfish just went, just floored it. And Gabby did an incredible job with the film. When, talk to us a little bit about when the film was being made. I mean, did you have any clue what impact this was going to have? I remember I came to Superpod 2 and Gabby was doing some follow-up interviews. And, my thought was like, wow, I hope somebody sends me the link on YouTube so I can see this film.
Yeah. Right. So no, you never know. By the way, there's a great YouTube video that, and I can send you the link if you'd like. It's really Tim Zimmerman's toast at the Sundance Film Festival regarding Blackfish. And in that toast, Gabby is there and all the cast is there and the executive producers are there. And he literally says in that toast, this was like night 1 or 2, that the executive producers had gotten us a house to meet at while we were at Sundance. And he literally thanked everybody and said, we gave it a strong effort. We made it to Sundance. The vast majority of documentaries don't make any money and don't gain any traction. And we were ready to just say our goodbyes right there. And then like the next day or the next 2 days, I don't know which day it was, what day 2 or day 3, Magnolia bought the film and then CNN bought the film. And, I've captured in one way or another most of the media surrounding the film along those lines, whether it was interviews at Sundance, YouTube interviews, Gabby interviews, Manny interviews, and a lot of them are on my YouTube channel, but they can be searched for. And, the thing literally blew up, and I think it had a great theatrical run. It actually did make some money. At Voice of the Orcas, one of the blogs that I write for, I listed out all of the national, all the cities that were showing the film at the theaters and what the dates were. But then I think it was the CNN double punched that really put it over the edge. Because I remember I was actually in. Now, by the way, most of us lost a lot of money participating just for the participation fee and the traveling and everything like that, going to Friday Harbor, this and that. But we did get a couple perks, and one of the perks that I got was a plane ride and a free stay at the Sheikh's Palace in Abu Dhabi in October of 2013, because basically Gabby dispersed the former trainers to different sites. For example, I got to go to Abu Dhabi in Italy, and Samantha went to South Korea, and Carol went here, and JJ went here, and blah, blah. And occasionally we'd all get to go to one together, like in Sarasota. I thought it was a great film festival. But anyway, I was in Abu Dhabi, about 12-hour time zone difference or thereabout, and I was staying up all night because this thing was airing on CNN, and it was some crazy number. Like I think the Nielsen ratings suggested that was it like 20 million people or something like that saw it that night. It was an unbelievable number, accompanied by a tweet storm with the trainers. People were asking questions, and it was before really the corporate takeover of Twitter, so to speak, if that makes sense. It was still kind of really personable on Twitter, and there were all these bots and advertisements at that time. And I think that the impact that Twitter had, and some of the animal justice pieces that were put forward by NGOs and PETA and other things like that, really just took off, and kind of the film became like this rallying point, or this rallying cry for the entire animal justice movement, which, as we all know, for the most part remains fragmented and in a lot of ways less effective than it could be, due to lack of money, due to disagreements, due to different approaches for things. But for that one couple of years, especially after the movie was released, it had a gigantic impact, and I was overwhelmed. Staying in like the Sheikh's Palace in Abu Dhabi, I got in trouble because I walked into the lobby with my flip flops on. I had no idea I was violating like the dress code and stuff like that. But in the lobby of the Sheikh's Palace, there was like one rule when we were in the palace: you couldn't go on the fourth floor because the king of Morocco had that floor, so you couldn't get off. But these rooms had butlers and so forth, and lazy rivers, and it was just insane. And then getting the
I bet he
feedback
could
from
wear
CNN.
flip flops.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wanted. It was a really cool experience to have that. Cheek and I rented a Dart 16 and went sailing around the Arabian Sea, and it was just a really good time for the movie because that was October. The movie had been at Sundance for 11 months, 10 months by that time, and had obviously had its theatrical run. Most of it was still in theaters, I think, at that time, but mostly CNN, was I don't know if this has a negative connotation these days, a booster shot for the film, and really took it over the top. And that became a model for other documentaries to try to emulate. And for the most part, other documentarians have not been able to replicate it because they're trying to create a formula out of what Blackfish was. And what I'm suggesting is that what Blackfish was actually goes back to Astrid van Ginneken and Ken Balcomb and the chemistry that the core trainers had in the film. And then, of course, Gabby bringing on, composers and artists like Jeff Beal to do the music for it, and the way she edited it without using a talking head voiceover, really literally had us finishing sentences together. And I think the 3-year warm-up that we had doing interviews for major networks, it was like practice, like you get asked questions so many times, you improve the way that you answer those questions. And I think that really the chemistry and the precision of our answers really were blended together expertly by Gabby. And of course it showed off in the final product.
It really was such a powerful film. And I remember CNN kept airing it over and over. It was like every weekend Blackfish was on. And it really added so much momentum to the anti-captivity movement for killer whales. When you were a trainer, did you have a sense before you saw killer whales in the wild? Was there some event or events that started getting you considering whether they were okay in captivity, or was it really the catalyst was coming out to San Juan Island and seeing them in their natural habitat?
Well, no, because keep in mind that, I don't know if you've read Astrid's book, Togetherness is Our Home, an orca's journey through life. That's a great book that she wrote in Dutch, and then it was translated in English. I have a copy here. But so I knew Astrid from I started in 1987. Astrid's first visitation to Orlando was 1988. And so I spent my first year at Shamu Stadium kind of as a dumb rookie, so to speak. But even from that early time, she was involved with the Center for Whale Research. So, and they eventually banished her from banished us from being able to talk to her. Of course, we would just take our conversations outside of Shamu Stadium or outside of the park. But I was able to see pictures, like the Southern Resident inventories beginning then. And the information that I was literally being told to tell students for educational shows was not completely, but in many ways, largely, it was basically a captivity propaganda in terms of things like lifespan and, the things we've been through a million times. I mean, SeaWorld drills teeth and calls it superior dental care, and I'm seeing these pictures of all these straight dorsal fins from the Southern residents back then when, they were 95 strong or thereabouts. And then looking at whether it was Kanduke or Kotar or Tilikum with this collapsed dorsal fins and broken teeth, I had there was this cognitive dissonance thing going on with me for a long time, and I became vocal about it. Like, in terms of the propaganda that we were putting forth. And so I spent only about 1 year at Shamu Stadium, and then I was moved to Whale and Dolphin, where I spent about 4 years working with belugas, false killer whales, white-sided dolphins, a spinner dolphin named Stan. I don't want to leave anybody out here. Terciops. We had like 18 animals there, and that was a lot of fun. And some of the smaller toothed whales, some of the smaller cetaceans didn't have the same teeth problems and collapsed dorsal fins that the orcas did. So I think the impacts of captivity are much more shocking on the orcas for obvious reasons. They're physically deconditioned. They break these beautifully conically shaped teeth on concrete and steel. And so I got circulated around. I rose up to senior trainer and got brought over to Shamu Stadium for my last 2 years, and reached the highest level. It was really Mark Simmons and myself for the last year to year and a half that were, when, for example, August Bush would come into the show, he or I were doing the VIP segment, and and so having being the senior trainer and having access to leading training sessions and setting up shows, and seeing how the internal mechanism worked with food deprivation and stuff like that was a slap in the face after being there for several years. So I returned to the Killer Whale Stadium and then saw all these problems. Astrid and I had never lost touch the whole time. She was coming, I think she came 17 or 18 times total, and I probably met with her most of those times. She had an academic schedule, and I think spent most of her summers, traveling the world, visiting killer whales, whether it was down in South America or at a captive park. And of course, she loved Gudrun and documented a lot of her life. And Gudrun was the catalyst for her book, Togetherness is Our Home. And I think if you read that book, it kind of is like I don't know, in terms of animal orca behavior, she has seen so much in the wild and in captivity through clear glass. She synthesizes the killer whale behaviors probably better than anywhere else it's ever been written. She, I guess, was a co-PI for Orca Survey for many years. I don't know what her title is now, because I know she stopped coming out as frequently, I think possibly when her mom, became older. But she was, one of these ladies, an MD, PhD, with a photographic memory. And it just blew me away how her, or Ken, or whoever, that you were working with, could recognize. And I'm sure, Jeff, you're at this level when you see a whale from, and you're just, who it is immediately. That kind of stuff was impressive to me. And I am thankful for the contributions that those, influencers made on my life, because it changed my life.
Well, and you've changed other people's lives, and certainly the lives of killer whales. And we actually had somebody out on our whale watching tour today who, he didn't mention Blackfish, but clearly he had seen it, because one of his questions was, is it really true that all male killer whales in captivity have dorsal fin collapse? And he was curious how often we see it out in the wild, and we don't.
Exactly, yeah. And so I actually say that in the film. And people don't realize this, and even maybe Gabby doesn't realize it, but I was looking at that from the get-go when I was seeing pictures of bull southern residents going back to 88 when I first started hanging out with Astrid. I never saw a collapsed killer whale, ever. And every single male, whether I was looking at a San Diego animal or a Texas animal, or the bulls that I worked with, Kotar, Duke, and Tilikum, they were all collapsed. And now as a medical doctor and someone that's investigated this, and I've JJ and myself and Ingrid have knocked around writing a paper on this, because she did that killer whale dorsal fin abnormality paper that SeaWorld took and mischaracterized. But it's pretty clear to me that the primary effect, in addition to, by the way, I posted Astrid talking about why killer whale dorsal fins collapse online from Superpod 1. That's online. My first experience with Orca Survey is online as well. But I think it's when you heat collagen, even just 1 to 2 degrees centigrade, it becomes denatured, and this can be replicated in a laboratory. And there's a lot of research on collagen because women use it to puff up their lips, and it's I think probably the most predominant connective tissue in mammals. And so with just a little bit of heating, the collagen molecule goes through a process called fibrillogenesis. And when you add a little bit of extra heat to that chemical reaction, the collagen fibrils actually are thinner and weaker. And so that process on a macroscopic level, I think, is carried into the orca dorsal fin, because in captivity, for example, Tilikum lived in pools that were more shallower than his length. The B, C, and E pools, I think, were 18 feet deep, and Tilikum was over 20 feet long. The only pool that was deeper than he was long was the front pool, and he only got to come out there for safety reasons during shows. So he basically had calluses developing on the distal edge of his tail flukes, just from dragging the bottom. Now, they did later on add that G pool facility where they put the elevating floor after Dawn was killed. I think that might have been 20-something feet deep, but I'm not even sure if that one was longer.
Well, and he was a huge killer whale.
Yeah. And he, in terms of length, I mean, Lolita, though, is almost as long as he is, I believe. Was he 22, and isn't Lolita like 20 or something like that? I can't remember right now. I think he was 22 feet long. And, but, Lolita, obviously, his southern residents are larger than the Icelandics. But anyway, it's just shameful what a pathetic life. I said this, I believe, in one interview. Imagine if you were living a life where you could only, like in Tilikum's case, take 1 or 2 strokes of your tail, and you have to turn around because there just is no more room to go. And then your tail is, for the most part, dragging the bottom your entire life. And so that creates almost like a straitjacket effect. And when he's in larger pools, like at G Pool in SeaWorld, Florida, he just became a target for, female aggression. And because these orcas, have no real natal origin, they're all kind of hybrid animals, except Katina was an Icelandic. It's unbelievable that she's still alive. But pretty much all of her progeny were hybrids. And so when SeaWorld talks about conservation, they're just making this propaganda up. There's nowhere for these whales to go, and most of the whales are combinations of Icelandics and southern residents, or Icelandics and transients. That's what Gudrun and Taima was a Kanduk Gudrun prodigy. So she was a half transient, half Icelandic. And so these animals have nowhere to go, even if they were ever to talk about one day repopulating wild populations. It's just pure nonsense. So these are the things, when I was working there, especially in the very last year and a half, when I was intently working with the killer whales, that really got me, flipped me into a different mindset. And then, of course, traveling out with Ken and Astrid, it was June of 1996 that I spent on the water, a couple weeks on the water with those guys, living at the Center for Whale Research, and on the High Spirits, and I was hanging out with Kelly a lot too. There was another power boat that we went on, and we dropped hydrophones in the water, and I tried to document that with one of those old high 8 players, and I can later digitize it. But it was a remarkable time, and just the islands itself where you guys are at are so remarkably beautiful, and we saw a lot of different whales, minke whales, harbor seals, transients, residents, tons of bald eagles, and it was just one of those kind of magical, catalysts of change periods of my life. And I was also back in school, and that also was the beginning of my march back into academia and trying to get into professional school. So it was a transitional time for me, and a time that seemed a lot simpler than the times are these days. But yeah, you guys live in a special place.
It is remarkable here, and we've got to get you back here to get you back out on the water. One of the things that you just said about all the different whales and where they came from and the hybrids, one of the most powerful lines in the movie to me is, and you said it, is talking about how these whales living in these confined spaces together. These are different nations. And it's a really, for those people who are listening who have not seen it, we are going to post links in the show notes. So if you have not seen Blackfish, or it's been a long time, definitely check it out again. Jeff, it's been incredibly powerful in its impact. Where is anti-captivity today? What's going on out there? What can people get involved in?
Yes. So, it's really, I think Blackfish was like a battle that the little guy won. And I think that it's had a great impact in at least in California and Canada and France and that good common sense, codifying some of the anti-captivity laws and capture and breeding laws is sprung out of Blackfish. And so that's been very rewarding. What is more concerning though is the stuff that's happening in China mainly, and the Middle East as well, where there's just this grind to create, what is a Long Gone Wild was kind of like a sequel to Blackfish in certain ways, and talked about the great impact that it had. But we're winning the battle at home, but abroad it's still expanding. I think what did they say in the film? There was like over 100 SeaWorlds in China, or parks that are looking to fill their pools with killer whales, and that's going to have a gigantic impact on whales in the Far East and that part of the world. So I would say it's a mixed ending at this point. We've seen some great success, great awareness, at least in the first world in Europe, and I should say first world in Western countries. We'll see how it goes in the other parts of the world. There's a lot of other, I think, large ecological concerns that I have. One of them is just the expanse of human population and industry, and how that's affecting river systems and changing the chemistry of the ocean and stuff like that. We're losing, coral reefs and phytoplankton and other food chain sources. And so these bigger fights, I think it would be great if, everyone got involved with, because they're serious. And if we lose the biosphere or put a serious dent in it, there's not going to be a fight left to have, if that makes sense. So from the perspective of Blackfish, I would say it was a great success. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and hopefully we can tweak our system to where it's not, based on consumption.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I do think Blackfish was an incredible success, and that led me to that's how I met you, was through your work in that. And
yeah.
You and I have shared some time on the water, watching killer whales and checking out the humpbacks in the Dominican Republic. One of the lines in the movie.
No, for sure.
Oh, that was incredible. One of the lines you mentioned in the film, and you mentioned it here on the podcast, is seeing killer whales swimming in straight lines, and I think it is blatantly obvious when we see it with our passengers when they see how they're living in the wild. It really hits home how you cannot provide an artificial environment and give them what they need and what they want in the wild. You can't do that in captivity. We always ask everybody that comes on to share some of their most memorable experiences on the water with killer whales or any other whales. And from your unique perspective, would love to hear about, one or two really memorable experiences that you've had out on the water.
Yeah, well, I think one of them is, I think I had a high camera when I was with Astrid and Kelly in 1996, June of 1996, and I think it was, was it K1? I think I saw. No, it was J1 and J2. I saw on the water, and it just blew me away. I think JJ told me he had the exact same experience. You kind of tear up because you simultaneously, when you see what this is, you're not only inspired by it, but then it also contrasts the last 8 years of my life. It's like, oh my God, what you come to this. That's what I mean by radically altering your perspective or my perspective. And that it forever changed me. It rocked my world. I got to spend 2 weeks out there with those guys. We saw whales pretty much every day, and I came out of that, I would say at least philosophically, a radically altered person. And I took that with me, and this folds back to the very first question, because Howie and Ken knew that, which is why they first pointed ABC Nightline to me in 2006, and then CNN to me in 2010. And that cycle is what created the opportunity for Blackfish to be made. So it changed me as a person. And then I feel like, the participation and the work that we put in, which has been a lot, it was thousands of hours and still happening. I mean, between the scientific works and the death at SeaWorld and stuff like that, and just doing research, it's never ending. We still are working hard, but it was a game changer for me, and in turn, Gabriella was able to take various folks and experiences and like John Crow. Think about the testimony that he gave. He had given that same speech, not speech, his same recollections to Ken and others at like a whale conference. What is it? The conference that Howie does, or once a year. I can't
the Way of
remember the
Whales.
name of it, I think he was filmed, giving that same story about the whale collections online, kind of a different variation of that story. But Gabby went out and found him, and he was one of the stars of the show. Howard did an amazing job talking about the collections and the synthesizing that she did with the former trainers, and then combining them with experts and eyewitness accounts of like Tilikum's time in Victoria was just remarkable. And it's like you said earlier, Jeff, it was a combination of the right people getting together and like a perfect storm, kind of creating this Blackfish effect. And that's a term that I came up with when I saw when they released the trailer for Blackfish. I was literally online that day, and I think I was in the top 50 people to see like the YouTube release of the first Magnolia when they released the trailer. And I watched it, and it was like, I don't know, I thought maybe I was number 40 or something that saw the thing. And then I just wanted to watch it again, like right when it was done, like 3 minutes later. And then it was like 10,000. And then wow. I hit it again, and it was like, 50,000, and it just was increasing exponentially. And so that's where I came up with the term the Blackfish effect, because I described it in an email as like the exponential growth in knowledge that the film seems to still have. Obviously that curve is plateaued off, but there was a time where it just was like asymptotically shooting up to infinity. Like just more and more people watched that trailer, and then the word got spread.
Yeah, I mean, the film changed the entire conversation, and I love that from your encounters in the wild that the iconic Southern residents J1 and J2 had a role in all of this.
Yeah, they certainly did. And I believe I have to check. I think it was J1 and J2, and I think I had Astrid explain how Mike Biggs, captured K1 and carved the triangle out of his fin, and then released him, and then proved that the markings of the dorsal fin would remain for life, and that was the basis for orca survey. And I got her on holding a crappy little camera, describing the whole basis for the study. And then there goes J1 and J2, but what the hell is going on here? And anyway, it was just really remarkable. And it was just the first day or the second day of a couple weeks of stuff like that happening. Stuff that you probably see on a daily basis. But for me, as a former guy that worked with incarcerated whales, it was something else.
Well, when I was rewatching the film, I'll tell you an example of how powerful the film is. I was watching. There was a scene, and I think it may have been Northern residents, a big group of them swimming, and there's beautiful music playing in the background, and how he's describing what orca culture is like. And I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to cry, and I'm like thinking to myself, I'm tearing up, and this is what I get to see every day when I'm out on the water. I'm not seeing anything any different, but the film was so powerful that it made me cry with things that I see out there on a regular basis. It's just incredible. And we will post links to the film in the show notes, and we really appreciate you joining us, Jeff.
Yeah, it's been great having you on.
Yeah, thank you both. I've had probably literally hundreds of people that just kind of they made me cry, and it makes me cry still too. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you. And you got an open invitation on our boat to come out and see more whales in the wild. And I think since the last time you've been out here, I mean, our humpback comeback, which we talked about on our last episode, has really just continues to explode. So we got to get you out for some humpbacks too.
Did you tweet about that too? Did you send out a tweet on that?
I did. I did.
I don't know if it was I retweeted that, and I also saw that podcast, and I've also was there with Goody. I think when you were there one year, we saw a humpback. I think we were on Western Prince. I can't remember what boat we were on, but we were looking for orcas that day, and there was just a couple of humpbacks that were out there. It was really cool. And that, of course, links up to the 2 trips that you and I have taken in at the Silver Bank, and those are 2 pivotal trips as well.
Yeah, those were incredible trips.
Well. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm honored to be on your show, and working hard to get the word out there, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it, and have a great night.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
It was great talking to Jeff. I haven't spoken with him in a while, and it was great having him on the show. And I'm going to grab as many of those videos from him, links, and put them in the show notes. But what an interesting experience, and interesting guy, and all the hard work that he's done. And with a lot of others to create this pivotal film.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we both know how impactful and powerful we felt the documentary was when it first aired, and we've seen firsthand, in the first couple of years after the documentary aired, just how much impact it had on people around the world. That came out here for, Superpod and that kind of thing. And still to this day, how many people on our tours reference Blackfish, and how they may have been to a marine park or SeaWorld or any of them and seen killer whales in captivity, and then to see them out in the wild is just apples and oranges, right? It's totally different. I've seen it in their faces, it dawns on them, you can see the just I don't know how to explain it. Just that understanding kind of come over them, how different it is, and how much there's no possible way we can meet their needs in a captive environment.
And it's an emotional experience for a lot of people, and this just popped into my mind, and I wish that we still had Jeff on the line to talk about this, but I think because of the film, a lot of people that do come out on our whale watching tours, we have in many ways a more educated guest on board who has seen the film, and they want to see them in the wild, and they understand, whereas maybe prior to the film, which was before my time out here, you may have had a lot of people that didn't really get the difference between seeing captive orcas and seeing killer whales in the wild.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think, there's still, I still hear it sometimes when I'm sitting on shore or even on the boat, but it's decreased a lot less, where people are like, oh, it's like Shamu, or, oh, they're putting on a show for us. Like, they're more cognizant of the fact that these animals are their own, like, unique, independent beings. They're not here for us. We're not here to use them. They're not here for our purpose. Like, we are privileged to get to share this place with them. And I have noticed, like, hopefully that's kind of decreasing, and more people are aware that, we're just out here visiting them in their home. And I think you said that on the water today. You're like, we're the aliens here. Like, we are here visiting.
Yeah, this is their place. This is their channel. This is their harbor.
We're their just place longer than we've been here. So
absolutely,
we're the guests here, and we need to act as such, right?
And I'll go into a little detail on that, and we'll go right into our recent sightings, because we've got so much cool stuff that's been going on here since our last episode. But today we were in this very narrow channel with two 15-year-old Biggs killer whales, not brothers, but really tight friends, coming from two families that are really tight friends. So it was T49A2 and T65A3. And they're in this narrow channel, and it's their channel. And they are in the middle of the channel fighting against a really strong current, because we had a big, big tidal swing today. And they're hunting a seal. And I'm having a challenging time just keeping view of them through the current. And at one point there were 3 large ferries going through the channel at the same time, and 2 going in one direction, 1 coming in the other direction, and then we know there's some more around the corner that are coming around. And
one of the ferries was sideways,
right, because of the current, and we're the visitors there, and the only ones who altered any behavior were the ferries and the whale watching boats, and the whales didn't change a beat. It's their world, and they're just hunting their seal. And the ferry comes by and it's close, and the whales just dive and they take the seal under. And I mean, it was absolutely an incredible experience. You really get these, when we're out on the water, we're in their world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes, like, we'll see it where, like, a big ship will come through and they'll either, like, deviate to ride the bow wake or the stern wake, or they'll take maybe a slightly longer dive if they're doing something else. These boys today, they did not alter a thing.
Nope.
Like, they came up next to the ferry at one point. It was crazy how close they were. I was pretty sure that the people standing on the top deck of the ferry couldn't even see them. They were that close. So,
and they didn't miss a beat. The hunt continued.
Yeah, so much blood on that one seal predation.
And we've had so these 2 males have been together, I think, for about
a week.
About a week. Prior to that, I don't know where T49A2 was, but T65A3 was with his mom and siblings. And every trip that I've done with them over the last few days, all they're doing is hunting. It is incredible, and it is wonderful to see killer whales that just have so much food availability that every trip you're seeing them. What are they doing? They're 2 15-year-old boys. What are they doing? They're eating.
Well, all the trips I've had with them recently, they've been sleeping. So we need to split this up again. But I mean, still 15-year-old boys eating or sleeping, right? It sounds pretty.
That sounds about right.
Standard.
We've also had a new Biggs killer whale for you and I both, and for many people in this area. T72, who you can talk a little bit about his background, where he's mostly seen, but for pretty much, I mean, most of the people that work out here, many of us have never seen him before, and he was here around July 4th for a few days, traveling with the T-34s and 37s.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that it comes up on this episode when we interviewed Jeff and talking about dorsal fin collapse, because he, doesn't have a full dorsal fin collapse, but the top of his fin
he's got a curl.
Is curled over quite significantly. He has some nicks in his fin. He's probably had some injuries there, and it happens. We have a couple that have like not a full collapse, but definitely some lean or some curl to it. He kind of reminds me of a whale we used to have around here that's passed away, but T40 Captain Hook. And I've seen a few people like on social media referring to T72 and like being like, "Oh, Captain Hook." Like, no, he's not Captain Hook, but he's nickname is Young. But he's pretty cool. Born, we think, around 1974.
So not young.
Not young.
His name is Young.
Not young, but his name is Young. And I think prior to this visit, he's only been seen here one other time, in my memory at least.
Was it 2017?
2017 in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And I don't think it was for very long, maybe a day or two.
What was interesting, so he spends a lot of time up in northern BC and southeast Alaska, and after our encounter with him, and we'll post a photo so you can see that the very top of his dorsal fin has a curl over to it. But I was looking at the distribution maps of documented sightings of T72 and also of the T34s and 37s, and there's quite a bit of overlap up north. And so I am sure that they know each other from up in Southeast Alaska, and possibly he just came down with them this time and said, fine, let me go check out this place you talk about that you go in the summer.
Yeah, and the distribution maps that Jeff mentioned is from an ID catalog. And Tasley last episode mentioned Jared Towers and Gary Sutton as two of the folks that she works with closely. Gary's her partner, and that is a catalog that Jared and Gary work a lot on. And there's other collaborators as well, I believe. But we'll post a link to that. So if you wanted to look at that, I think it's available online in PDF form. But it's a really cool resource that they've put a huge amount of time and effort into. And, the Biggs population is growing so fast. Like it was released in 2019, and I think it was outdated the week after that. There was like a new calf to add to it, but it's a huge, amazing resource. And so you can see those maps.
Also in our recent sightings, I think we should mention, so the T65As, and that's the family that one of the 15-year-old boys comes from. He's T65A3. The T65As are quite a social family around here, and it seems like every summer they are hanging out with another family, like inseparable all summer long. They take them down into Puget Sound. They take them down all the way down to Olympia, into Hood Canal. And a few years ago, the family that they would hang out with was the T49As. And I think that is possibly where 49A2 and 65A3 formed the basis of the foundation of their friendship. But one year it was the T137s. They were the cool family that for the summer hanging out with the 65As, and now it's the T77s. They're the flavor of the year.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, though, because I was looking through some old photos from 2014 most recently, and I have some from even earlier than that, of encounters I had with the T65As. And guess who's in there with them? T77 and her kids. So not all of them, right? But they associate a bit and have for years.
It's their social interactions and relationships it's nonstop fascinating.
Yeah, it makes me wish I could interview them, but
would love to have them on maybe next week our guest will be the T65As. Yeah. That would be awesome.
But yeah, no, it's been really cool watching that. And T65A5 was the 8-year-old that was kind of like taken. He wasn't, maybe was stuck, but not really stuck in the lagoon in Port Angeles Harbor.
We talked about that on the last episode.
Over a month ago. I think that was maybe on episode 2, 1 or 2. I don't remember. Time flies, right? But he's been seen with T37A1 bouncing around from family to family. We had him with his aunt for a day or two.
And T37A1, we talked about in an episode, who was hanging out with T34A1.
Right. And then dropped her off with mom,
and then
T37A.
Right. And then went to hang out with T65A5.
Yep. And T34A1, we talked about her last episode with Tasley. She was seen with the T65Bs like the day we recorded the episode with Tasley.
Right.
And I think was seen either the next day or maybe we had talked to Tasley and it had been the day before. And then that day that we recorded, she had also been seen with the T65Bs. So she was with them for at least a couple of days.
But then we saw the 65Bs
not long after
with the T123s, and 34A1 was not there and have not heard from since. So
no. So who knows who she's with?
She's probably with T65A5.
Well, he's been seen with T37A1 since then. So I don't know. Maybe she went up to Alaska.
Who knows? But hopefully we'll find out before the next podcast. But we have also had what would be rare in the last few years. We've had southern resident killer whale sightings in July
and June.
And you spent a good amount of time watching them on the west side. I had a really nice experience watching them. We were quite distant from them last evening. We were about a little over half a mile away, but beautiful conditions and glassy water and pre-sunset lighting, and we were just watching them in the distance. Motors were shut off. You could hear their exhales. It was incredible.
Magic.
And you've seen them from the west side of San Juan Island quite a bit in the last week or so. What are some interesting notes? I know we have and I think I'm checking my emotions on this and being very, very cautious about first calf in K-Pod in 11 years?
11 years, yeah. So, in May, a boater off the coast of Oregon got video of whales that we identified as members of K-Pod, and there appeared to be a young calf in the mix. And it was pretty grainy video, but amazing. And we all were like, oh gosh, there could be a new calf in K-Pod, and it would have been 11 years since we had K44 had been born. And got another video a few weeks later. Again, there was it looked like there was a small whale in there. And they did return, a few days ago. And it looks like K20 has given birth to a calf. So first surviving calf born into the pod since K44 joined in 2011. So this calf will be designated K45. And, it's been a roller coaster of a ride for me with the southern residents since, I first started coming up here in the early 90s. We always get so excited about all the new babies. And I always feel that excitement when, we see a new calf and a video of a new calf or photos of a new calf or what have you. And I try to live in that excitement, and as I'm trying also to guard myself, right? Because the first year after a calf is born, it's a critical period for that calf, but it's a really critical period of time for the mom as well. And she needs a lot of extra calories. She needs a lot of extra, food, basically. We need to get these whales more to eat. And so it's really, really critical for moms. There's just so much, potential for, I don't want to say it to go wrong, but, we just want to be, celebrating, but also using this as impetus to continue to fight for more salmon for these whales.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges for me, and I was saying I'm being emotionally cautious, is we don't see K-pod very much. So they go dark for long periods of time, and so I know there's going to be a long period where we're not going to know what's going on. That makes it a little bit more difficult. There was some good news coming out of Washington D.C. today regarding the Snake River dams, and the federal government is starting to weigh in on. I mean, they've been largely ignoring the issue, and for those who are not as familiar, the Snake River is one of the tributaries of the Columbia River and had been historically the largest Chinook salmon producing tributary of the Columbia River system, until there were 4 dams put in there. I think it was in the 1950s, and the Chinook salmon production on the Columbia River has been in decline ever since the dams went up, in spite of spending money to the tune of $24 billion to increase for salmon recovery on the Snake River. $24 billion that has had no impact. And so there is similar to Blackfish, there is has been a growing movement to remove the Snake River dams and replace whatever energy they produce with other forms of with some green energy. And I kind of equate the two things of, what is the big catalyst going to be for the Snake River that finally pushes that needle over the top, like Blackfish did, at least in Western countries, regarding captivity. But at least the federal government is starting to weigh in, and they are starting to. I think there were 2 reports that came out that said that something to the extent that in order to enable real salmon recovery on the Snake River, the dams need to come down.
Right. And also in the report said that like the energy generated, which is surplus energy, from what I understand, like we have, like a 16% surplus in energy. And I think this lower Snake River dams account for a fraction of that, can be recovered in other places. So it's not like we're losing that percentage of a surplus, but, there are other things, right? There's shipping and that kind of thing that need to be taken into account. But, I think it's great news that, NOAA on a federal level has released these reports, through the Biden administration, that their analysis shows that, the Snake River dams need to be breached in order for salmon recovery to be meaningful in the Columbia River Basin. This is not the hey, these reports are released, and so the Biden administration is going to breach those dams. It's the Biden administration has released these reports, and they've also said that, ongoing regional movement will need to be taken into account. So it's not the hey, now's the time to take a breath and not push this hard. It's the time to push harder.
It wasn't the release of Blackfish.
Right. This is overtime, guys. This is the time that we need to continue to push both regionally and federally that this we need to find ways to make this happen.
And there is a catalyst out there like Blackfish, and who knows, maybe it's Samnesia. We talked about that in a prior episode, and talking about, and it's something that we're hearing here now with the Southern residents who had been in, but they all, as of today, seem to all have left and gone west, possibly back out to the outer coast. But we're hearing a lot of talk of how many fish are here right now. Wow, there's a lot of Chinook salmon here. All the fishermen are saying, they're seeing more fish than we've seen in years. And it goes back to that, what we talked with David about in Samnesia is well, is it really a lot of fish, or is it a lot of fish for the last 5 or 10 years? But versus 50 years ago, there's no way it's a lot of fish.
Yeah. And what we have to remember too is as these populations of Chinook salmon and other salmon too, because other salmon are affected by the dams on the Snake River and other rivers as well, is that the body size has changed. So it used to be that, Chinook salmon were 75 to 100 pounds. Like I have photos from the early 1900s of these huge salmon that are bigger than a kid, like, and
I think you should post that.
I'll try to find it.
Photos in the show notes, because they are really, that's another Samnesia thing, is we don't realize, we see a 15-pound Chinook and we're like, wow, that fish is big. But that's generational amnesia right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are the photos too of like coming into the fish canneries where there's just like, fish as far as the eye can see. And I know at least here in Friday Harbor, from what I've heard, and is that sometimes they would bring in so many salmon, they couldn't actually process it all. And they would just like let these decaying carcasses of salmon go. Like, just think about how that we were taking historically, right?
Right.
And
so we're gonna have to have a whole episode, I think, just on
just talking salmon. About this, because we could talk about the Elwha River, and I think we should. So maybe we'll like table that for our next episode.
And we have been seeing humpbacks.
We have been seeing humpbacks. I do want to say, yes. And I just kind of like lost my train of thought.
No, that was my fault. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. With the whole, nope, I lost it. So
Samnesia.
Yeah.
And the canneries.
I've lost it. It's okay. It's okay.
It's going to come back.
It'll come back.
And just interrupt me if it does. But we did, I mentioned the humpbacks because we do appreciate all the feedback that we got from our last episode about the humpback comeback. And would love to hear more feedback from you about this episode. And perhaps if you're interested in a salmon episode or what you might be interested in hearing and learning about, definitely get in touch with us. You can email us at afterthebreachpodcast@gmail.com. You can get all of our show notes, including all the photos, on our website, afterthebreachpodcast.com. You can listen to us on iTunes, on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Please rate us, give us comments, give us feedback. We really, really appreciate you joining us. Is it coming back to you yet?
It is. It did come back, but awesome. I was like listening to you talk about this. And so I think one of the things that's so important as we're talking about like dam removal, potential dam removal or breaching, is, that these recreational fishermen like get a lot of heat for taking salmon. But hunters and fishers both can be some of the best advocates, just like whale watchers. Like we are looked at like we are a big part of the problem, and we're not, but we're an easy target. And I think recreational fishermen are as well. And I think we're both looking at the same goal. We both want more salmon. Like salmon is a key for all of us. And so I think one of the things that maybe the government, maybe other organizations have successfully done is kind of pitted the whale community against the fishing community. And I think that's just something we need to like keep in mind, right?
Absolutely. And I think that had we managed salmon, and not just fishing, had we managed commercial fishing and managed preservation of spawning habitat correctly at the beginning of this, then there'd be enough for a healthy, viable commercial fishery, recreational fishery, killer whales, bears, and everybody that we talked about this on the Samnesia episode. There'd be enough for everybody. And so this idea of it's terrible being pit against other interests, because everybody has the same interests. And if we do things right, we can rebuild it so that everybody wins. And we talked about that in the Samnesia episode.
Yep.
I'm glad you remembered your point.
Me too. It's, one of those days where the brain fog sets in. So, but I think this is a really important topic that we should definitely bring up in a future episode or multiple future episodes.
Yeah, and we'll find a good guest or maybe a panel and do a deep dive into salmon and salmon recovery.
Yeah. And it's been awesome. This episode's been great. It was great talking with Jeff. It was great talking with you, Jeff, too.
Thank you.
But we would love to have you guys out with us on the water too if you're up in the San Juan Islands. And I think we're talking about, just a quick little note about doing some humpback trips later this fall. We're starting to see some bigger aggregations, groupings of humpbacks that we mentioned on the episode last time with Tasley.
Yeah, had the video posted in our show notes. And I hear somebody is going to be running a photography workshop this fall.
Maybe. Yeah, we're thinking about it. September, we're thinking of doing a 2-day photo workshop and also tacking in like photo processing, how to ID whales, that kind of all that fun stuff. Chatting with Monica, who was a guest on episode 2, and other stuff.
And coming out on the water with Sarah and I.
Yeah.
That's the highlight.
Spending 2 full days on the water with the both of us. So, if anybody's interested in that workshop, we would love to have you out. Should be mid-September, I think is what we're looking at, the 16th and 17th, if my brain fog has not set in too.
Is it a Saturday, Sunday?
It's a Friday, Saturday.
Mm-hmm. So you can message us on Instagram at After the Breach or email us afterthebreachpodcast@gmail.com, or get other info, other contact info of our personal Instagrams on our website, afterthebreachpodcast.com. But yeah, if anybody's interested in the photo workshop, definitely, or just coming out on the water anytime, definitely get in touch with us.
Yeah, we'd love to have you out. And thanks for another great episode, Jeff. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I am too. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you all for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us.
Yep, we'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for joining in.